One woman, one German Shepherd, one roadside confrontation that changes everything. Watch how truck driver Sarah Thornton's viral moment transforms America's trucking industry forever. Comment where you're watching from and subscribe now. The December morning air bit through Sarah Thornton's jacket as she pulled her 18-wheeler to a stop at the Interstate 80 checkpoint outside Cheyenne, Wyoming. Frost painted delicate patterns on her windshield despite the defroster's valiant efforts. She'd been driving since 3 a.m., hauling timber from Oregon to Nebraska, her cab a warm haven against the brutal 20-degree weather outside. Sarah tucked a strand of her auburn hair, streaked with silver, behind her ear and grabbed her logbook. At 45, the lines around her eyes told stories of 2 decades on America's highways. She knew routine checkpoints like the back of her weathered hands. "Maximus, stay," she instructed the massive German Shepherd watching attentively from the passenger seat. The dog's intelligent eyes followed her as she climbed down from the cab, her boots crunching on the frozen gravel. Officer Daniels stood waiting, his stance rigid, breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Sarah had encountered plenty like him, small men with big badges who saw the world in rigid hierarchies. "License and registration," he demanded without a greeting, eyes narrowing as he realized a woman stood before him. Sarah handed over her documents. "Morning, officer. Everything's in order." Daniels scanned her paperwork with exaggerated scrutiny. "This your rig?" "Yes, sir, 5 years now. Paid off last spring." His thin lips curled into a smirk. "Well, ain't that something? Wouldn't expect a little lady like you handling a beast this size." Several other truckers had stopped, some watching the interaction while drinking coffee from thermos cups. "I managed just fine," Sarah replied evenly, though her jaw tightened. "I'll need to see your commercial license again," Daniels said, though he'd already checked it. Hard to believe they're just handing these out to housewives these days. Sarah felt heat rising to her face despite the cold. "I've logged over 1 million safe miles, Officer Daniels." "Million miles, huh?" He chuckled, looking toward the other officers who had gathered nearby. "Hear that, boys? We got ourselves a regular female Dale Earnhardt." One of the other drivers filming the interaction called out, "Come on, man. Check her papers and let her roll. We all got schedules." Daniel's face darkened. "You stay out of this, buddy. This is highway safety business." He turned back to Sarah, voice rising for the audience. "Women aren't capable of handling heavy vehicles like this. It's biology. These trucks need a man's strength and reflexes." The cab door of Sarah's truck opened, and Maximus leapt down with surprising grace for his size. He didn't bark or growl, just padded silently to Sarah's side and placed himself between her and the officer. His posture was perfect, alert but calm, his training evident in every controlled movement. Daniels took an involuntary step backward. "Control your animal." "He is controlled," Sarah said quietly. "Perfectly." She noticed more phones recording now. A female driver from a nearby rig gave her a subtle thumbs up. Daniels looked at the cameras, then at Maximus, whose disciplined stance never wavered. Something in the officer's demeanor shifted. "Keep your logbook updated," he muttered, thrusting her documents back at her. "And get that taillight fixed." Sarah hadn't mentioned any taillight issue, but she nodded. "Yes, sir." "Anything else?" "Move along," he said, waving her through with forced authority. As Sarah climbed back into her truck with Maximus, she didn't realize that one of those videos was already uploading to social media, tagged #RoadWarriorWoman. She didn't know that by nightfall, it would reach hundreds of thousands of views. She just knew she had miles to cover before sunset and a load to deliver. As she pulled back onto I-80, she reached over to scratch behind Maximus's ear. "Good boy," she whispered. "Dad taught you well, didn't he?" The big shepherd leaned into her touch as the snow-covered plains of Wyoming stretched before them, endless and open. Sarah's phone buzzed incessantly as she pulled into the truck stop outside Kearney, Nebraska that evening. She ignored it, focusing instead on finding a decent parking spot for her Kenworth T680. The day's driving had left her shoulders tight, her eyes burning from the endless white highway stretching before her windshield hour after hour. "Come on, Max," she said, grabbing her thermos as the German Shepherd stirred from his nap. "Let's stretch those legs." The truck stop hummed with the usual activity, drivers fueling up, sharing cigarettes and road stories, the smell of diesel and cheap coffee hanging in the air. A few nodded at Sarah as she walked by, more acknowledgement than she typically received. "Hey, road warrior woman," called a voice, and Sarah turned to see a young driver, maybe 30, with a friendly grin. "Saw you put that Wyoming trooper in his place this morning. Man's gone viral." Sarah frowned. "What are you talking about?" The driver pulled out his phone, showing her a video that had already accumulated over 200,000 views. There she was, standing tall despite being a head shorter than Officer Daniels. And there was Maximus, silently asserting himself between them. "Jesus," Sarah muttered, suddenly understanding the barrage of notifications. Back in her truck, she scrolled through messages. Her daughter Ellie studying at UCLA, her sister in Ohio, even drivers she'd met only once at truck stops across the country. The video had sparked something, becoming a symbol in the ongoing conversation about women in male-dominated industries. Sarah called Ellie, needing to hear a familiar voice. "Mom, you're famous." Ellie's voice came through, excited but tinged with concern. "Famous wasn't exactly on my bucket list, sweetheart," Sarah sighed, watching Maximus settle into his spot. "I was just doing my job. That's why it's resonating. You weren't making a statement. You were just being you. And that incredible dog of Grandpa's. I always knew Max was special." Sarah smiled, remembering her father's gentle hands training the shepherd pup. A Vietnam veteran turned trucker, he'd spent his final years teaching both Sarah and Maximus everything he knew. The dog had been his parting gift before cancer took him 2 years ago. "Your grandfather would be proud," Sarah admitted, the ache of missing him still fresh. "Mom, have you seen the comments? Women truckers from all over are sharing their stories because of you." Sarah hadn't. She started reading them now, accounts of harassment, of being denied loads because women can't handle them, of proving themselves again and again. A new notification popped up, an email from Golden Road Logistics, one of the largest carriers in the country. "Miss Thornton, we've been impressed by your professionalism as showcased in recent media. We'd like to discuss potential opportunities with our company." Sarah snorted. "Suddenly I'm in demand, huh? Where were they when I was begging for routes after your dad left?" "Dad's lost, Mom. Always was." Ellie's voice softened. "What will you do?" Sarah looked out at the vast parking lot, at the drivers moving between rigs like ships passing in the night. At 45, she'd built her life around self-reliance, never needing anyone since Tom had walked out, leaving her with a mountain of debt and a 9-year-old daughter to raise. She'd chosen trucking because it paid better than anything else available in their small Minnesota town, and she'd learned to thrive in this nomadic existence. "I don't know, Elle," she admitted. "I'm not an activist. I'm just trying to make my deliveries and keep us afloat." "Maybe you're both," Ellie suggested. "Think about it, okay? Sometimes life gives you unexpected detours." After hanging up, Sarah sat quietly with Maximus, sharing a sandwich and watching the stars emerge over Nebraska's flat horizon. The shepherd rested his head on her lap, his warm presence a comfort in her solitary world. "What do you think, Max?" she whispered. "Should we take a chance on something new?" Maximus looked up at her with those intelligent eyes that seemed to hold her father's wisdom, and for a moment, Sarah could almost hear Dad's voice. "Sometimes the road chooses you, Sarah Bear. You just gotta be brave enough to follow it." A week after the incident, Sarah sat in the plush waiting room of Golden Road Logistics regional headquarters in Chicago. The gleaming glass building stood in stark contrast to the gritty truck stops and roadside diners she'd called her second home for the past decade. Maximus lay at her feet, impeccably behaved despite the strange environment. "Miss Thornton," a young woman with a tablet approached. "Mr. Harrington will see you now." Sarah smoothed her best flannel shirt, the one without any coffee stains, and followed, Maximus padding silently behind her. Robert Harrington, CEO of Golden Road Logistics, rose from behind an imposing mahogany desk as she entered. In his tailored suit and Italian leather shoes, he looked like he'd never seen the inside of a truck cab, yet he carried himself with the confidence of someone who owned hundreds of them. "Sarah Thornton," he said, extending his hand. "The woman who's got the trucking world talking." "Not by choice," Sarah replied, her handshake firm. "The best movements rarely start intentionally." Harrington gestured to a leather chair. "Please sit." As she settled in, she noticed framed newspaper articles on the wall. Most recent was one headlined, "Golden Road Faces Class Action Lawsuit. Female drivers allege systemic discrimination." Harrington followed her gaze. "We've had our challenges with gender equity. Hence my interest in you. I'm not a publicity stunt, Mr. Harrington. Call me Robert, he said, leaning forward. And that's exactly why you're perfect. You weren't trying to make a statement. You were just doing your job with dignity and skill. That resonates with people. He pulled out a glossy folder and slid it across the desk. Lead driver position. Company's newest fleet of trucks. You'd be the face of our road equality initiative. Public speaking at industry events. Mentoring program for new female drivers. Sarah glanced at the salary figure and nearly choked. It was triple what she currently made. Why me? I'm sure you have plenty of qualified women drivers already, who don't have 2 million video views and a remarkable German Shepherd, Harrington countered. Sarah, transportation is changing. We need to change with it or be left behind. She thought of Ellie and her student loans, of the mortgage on their small Minnesota house, of retirement, which had always seemed like a distant fantasy. I don't do corporate politics, she said flatly. And Maximus comes with me everywhere. Wouldn't have it any other way. Your dog's become quite the mascot. A knock at the door interrupted them. A young man entered, mid-30s, expensively dressed with Harrington's same strong jaw. Dad, the board is waiting. He stopped short, eyes narrowing at Sarah. Sorry, didn't realize you were in a meeting. Alexander, meet Sarah Thornton. She'll be leading our new initiative. The younger Harrington's smile didn't reach his eyes. Pleasure. I thought we agreed to discuss senior appointments together. Sometimes opportunities present themselves unexpectedly, Robert replied smoothly. Sarah, this is my son Alexander. He oversees our fleet operations. Alexander's handshake was brief, his gaze dismissive. The checkpoint video. Quite the performance. It wasn't a performance, Sarah said quietly. An uncomfortable silence settled before Robert cleared his throat. Alexander was in line for the fleet ambassador position. But given recent events, we decided a fresh perspective was needed. Understanding dawned. She'd be working directly under a man who already resented her. I'll need time to consider, Sarah said, rising. Of course. We need you to start in 2 weeks if you accept. Outside in the parking lot, Sarah leaned against her personal pickup truck, feeling the weight of the decision before her. Maximus sat attentively at her side, his presence grounding. What do you think, Max? She asked. Trade our freedom for security? Her phone buzzed with a text from Ellie. Did you meet with them? What happened? Sarah stared at the gleaming headquarters, remembering the years of struggle after Tom left, the nights wondering how she'd afford Ellie's school supplies, the humiliation of food stamps, the punishing hours on the road away from her daughter. The position would mean stability, respect, and enough money to secure Ellie's future. But Alexander Harrington's cold eyes had told her everything she needed to know. This wouldn't be easy. She'd be navigating a corporate battlefield instead of highways. As if sensing her thoughts, Maximus pressed his warm body against her leg. Okay, she whispered, both to herself and her daughter's text. Let's see where this road takes us. Sarah's first day at Golden Road Logistics arrived with the crisp promise of early spring. She parked her pickup beside luxury sedans and SUVs in the executive lot, her employee badge still feeling foreign in her hand. Maximus sat alert in the passenger seat, his ears perked forward. Different world, isn't it, boy? She murmured, adjusting her new company jacket, navy blue with gold threading, a far cry from her worn denim and flannel. The orientation proceeded with corporate efficiency, HR paperwork, benefits enrollment, company policies. By afternoon, Sarah found herself in the massive garage facility where Golden Road's fleet was maintained. The familiar smell of diesel and rubber grounded her amid the corporate newness. Your flagship, said Miguel, the head mechanic, leading her to a gleaming midnight blue Peterbilt 579. It stood taller and more impressive than any rig she'd driven before, with aerodynamic curves and state-of-the-art safety features. Ultra-low emission vehicle, best technology on the market. Sarah ran her hand along the hood, appreciating the craftsmanship. She's beautiful. And you must be the YouTube sensation, came a voice behind her. Alexander Harrington approached, flanked by 2 men in matching Golden Road polos. His smile was professionally crafted but failed to warm his eyes. Just Sarah is fine, she replied evenly. Of course, Dad's newest project. Alexander's gaze flicked dismissively to Maximus. The dog really necessary in our facilities? He goes where I go? It was in my contract. Ah yes, the special contract. Alexander's tone hardened slightly. Well, I'm here to brief you on your first assignment. Minneapolis to Phoenix, delivering medical supplies. High visibility route. He handed her a tablet. You'll be stopping at 5 of our partner facilities along the way. PR will meet you at each for photos, social engagement, the whole show. I thought I'd be training new drivers, Sarah said, scrolling through the complex itinerary. That comes later. First, we need to establish your brand. The last word dripped with subtle disdain. The truck will be wrapped with the Road Equality Initiative graphics tomorrow. Very inspiring. Women drivers, diversity, all that good publicity. One of Alexander's companions snickered quietly. Sarah straightened to her full height, still a head shorter than Alexander. I've been driving professionally for 15 years, Mr. Harrington. I don't need branding. I need respect. Alexander's facade cracked momentarily, revealing genuine surprise at her directness. Well, he recovered. Respect is earned in the corporate world, Miss Thornton. I suggest you focus on making your delivery schedule. Phoenix facility is notoriously strict about timing. After they departed, Miguel whistled low. You just stood up to the prince. The prince. Alexander. Been groomed to take over since birth. Word is he's furious his father hired you without consulting him. Sarah sighed, leaning against the truck. Wonderful. For what it's worth, Miguel added. Plenty of us are glad you're here. My sister's been trying to get hired as a driver for 2 years. Maybe now she'll have a shot. The weight of expectations settled on Sarah's shoulders. Not just the company's, but those of women she'd never met who saw her as some kind of pioneer. She'd never asked for this responsibility. That evening, Sarah familiarized herself with the Peterbilt systems, Maximus exploring the spacious cab. Her phone rang. Ellie calling from California. How was day one in the corporate world? Different, Sarah admitted. The son resents me taking his position. Office politics already? You've arrived, Mom. Ellie laughed. Dad called, by the way. Sarah's grip tightened on the phone. What did he want? Saw the video. Said he always knew you'd make something of yourself. 12 years too late to be supportive, Sarah muttered. I told him you were busy revolutionizing the trucking industry, Ellie said proudly. He got real quiet after that. Sarah smiled despite herself. Her daughter had grown into a fierce defender during the years when Tom's child support checks mysteriously failed to arrive. The next morning, Sarah arrived early to find her truck transformed, wrapped in vibrant graphics featuring the Golden Road logo and Road Equality Initiative emblazoned on both sides. Her first major corporate delivery would leave the following day. That night, she meticulously checked the rig systems, something feeling off about the maintenance report. The oil pressure readings seemed unusual. Following her father's teachings, she crawled under the massive vehicle with a flashlight. Found you, she whispered, discovering a loose connection that could have caused a breakdown halfway to Phoenix. It seemed too convenient to be an oversight. As she tightened the fitting, she wondered if this was simply poor maintenance or the first move in a game she hadn't agreed to play. Either way, Sarah Thornton had weathered worse storms than Alexander Harrington. With Maximus watching attentively from the side, she continued her inspection, preparing for whatever lay ahead on this unfamiliar road. The pre-dawn air carried a biting chill as Sarah guided the gleaming Peterbilt onto Interstate 35, headed south from Minneapolis toward Phoenix. Maximus sat in his special harness on the passenger seat, his breath fogging the window as he watched the city lights recede behind them. The digital dashboard glowed with state-of-the-art technology, a stark contrast to the well-worn analog gauges of her previous truck. First corporate run, Max, Sarah said, adjusting the climate control. 5 days, 6 stops, and apparently we're supposed to smile for the cameras at every one. Her phone chimed with a notification, a text from Alexander Harrington. PR team waiting in Des Moines. Don't be late. No pleasantries, no well wishes for the journey. Just instructions. The brilliant oranges and pinks of sunrise gradually illuminated the Iowa farmland as Sarah settled into the rhythm of the road. Despite the truck's unfamiliar feel, the highway was her true home. The white lines hypnotic, the engine's hum a meditation. Here, she knew exactly who she was and what was expected of her. By mid-morning, dark clouds gathered on the horizon. The weather alert system on her dashboard flashed warnings of severe thunderstorms across the Midwest. Sarah frowned, calculating alternate routes. Dispatch, this is Thornton, she radioed to headquarters. Weather system looking significant on my route. Requesting permission to detour through Kansas City instead of Des Moines. There was a pause before Alexander's voice came through, surprising her. Negative, Thornton. PR events are scheduled. Proceed as planned. Sir, with respect, I'm looking at potentially dangerous conditions. Our meteorology team says it's manageable, he replied tersely. The truck has advanced stability control. Follow your assigned route. The radio clicked off before she could respond. Corporate logistics, she muttered to Maximus, who tilted his head attentively. Dad always said never trust someone who hasn't felt the wind push a rig sideways. 3 hours later, Sarah white-knuckled the steering wheel as powerful crosswinds battered the truck. Rain lashed against the windshield in violent sheets. Visibility reduced to mere yards. She reduced speed, ignoring the persistent messages from dispatch asking for an updated arrival time. A figure appeared suddenly in her headlights. A small sedan spun sideways across the highway, its hazards blinking weakly. Sarah expertly maneuvered the massive truck to a safe stop on the shoulder. Stay, Max, she ordered, pulling on her rain gear. The storm's fury hit her full force as she stepped down. Wind-driven rain stung her face as she approached the car, finding a terrified young woman clutching a phone with no signal. My tire blew out, the woman shouted over the storm. I can't get through to anyone. I'm Sarah, she yelled back. Let's get you somewhere safe. Back in her truck, the woman, Melissa, a college student driving home, shivered as Sarah handed her a thermos of coffee. You just happened to stop? In this? Melissa asked incredulously. It's what drivers do, Sarah replied simply, radioing in the situation. Alexander's voice crackled through. Transfer the civilian to Highway Patrol and continue to your destination. Highway Patrol is overwhelmed with accidents, Sarah countered. There's a truck stop 20 miles ahead. I'll drop her there safely. Thornton, that's not protocol. Sarah switched off the radio, earning a surprised look from Melissa. Won't you get in trouble? The young woman asked. Sarah smiled wryly. Probably, but my father taught me some things matter more than schedules. At the truck stop, as Melissa waited for her brother to arrive, a journalist approached Sarah, drawn by the distinctive wrapped truck. Claire Bennett, Midwest Transport Monthly. She introduced herself. You're with Golden Road's new initiative? Mind if I ask a few questions about women in trucking while you're stopped? Sarah hesitated, Alexander's instructions about authorized PR echoing in her mind. But looking at Claire's genuine interest and Melissa's grateful expression, something shifted in her perspective. You know what? I'd be happy to talk. For the next 30 minutes, Sarah spoke candidly about the realities of life on the road for female drivers, the challenges, the brotherhood and sisterhood of highway travelers, the way experienced truckers pass down knowledge like precious heirlooms. There's this myth that it's all about brute strength, she explained as Claire recorded their conversation. But modern trucking is about judgment, patience, technical knowledge, things that have nothing to do with gender. By the time she reached Des Moines, 3 hours behind schedule, the PR team had left and Alexander was fuming on the phone. You missed the planned media event, went off script with an unauthorized interview, and deliberately ignored direct instructions, he listed icily. I made the right call for safety, Sarah replied, exhaustion seeping into her voice. And I helped someone who needed it. That's not your job anymore, Alexander countered. Your job is to represent this company according to our carefully crafted strategy. As she ended the call, Sarah noticed Maximus staring intently at her, his posture alert in a way she'd rarely seen before. What is it, boy? She asked, puzzled by his behavior. Only later would she understand that Maximus had been reacting to her emotional state, the first sign of an extraordinary ability that would soon change both their lives. The incident with Melissa during the storm marked a turning point in Sarah's understanding of Maximus. As they continued their journey southwest through Missouri and Oklahoma, she noticed patterns in his behavior that seemed impossible to dismiss as coincidence. At a truck stop outside Tulsa, Maximus suddenly tensed beside her as they approached a group of drivers. Seconds later, an argument erupted between two men, one towering and aggressive, the other visibly nervous. Before Sarah could react, Maximus positioned himself near the smaller driver, not threatening the aggressor, but simply standing with quiet authority. The larger man faltered mid-sentence, his attention drawn to the imposing shepherd. That your dog, lady? He is, Sarah confirmed. noticing how Maximus maintained perfect composure, alert but calm. "Smart animal," the man muttered, backing down and walking away. Later that evening, Sarah sat in her cab reviewing the next day's route when her phone rang. It was Dr. Eleanor Chun, the corporate veterinarian Golden Road had assigned to monitor Maximus's health during their travels. "Just checking in on our canine ambassador," Dr. Chun said warmly. "How's he adjusting to the new schedule?" Sarah hesitated before answering. "Actually, I've noticed something strange. He seems to sense emotional situations before they happen." "Interesting," Dr. Chun replied, her voice shifting from casual to professional curiosity. "Can you elaborate?" Sarah described several incidents. Maximus alerting to tense encounters, comforting a child at their Kansas stop who minutes later had a meltdown, even his behavior during the confrontation with Officer Daniels weeks earlier. "I'd like to meet him in person when you reach Phoenix," Dr. Chin said. "What you're describing sounds like emotional sensing abilities, rare, but documented in certain lines of service dogs." Sarah glanced at Maximus, now sleeping peacefully. "My father trained him from a pup. Said he had special potential, but I always thought he just meant as a companion. Your father may have recognized something extraordinary in him. Some handlers work their entire careers hoping to train a dog with natural empathic abilities." The conversation stayed with Sarah as they crossed into the Texas Panhandle the next day. The vast, open landscape reminded her of her father, his quiet strength, his connection to the land, his intuitive understanding of both machines and animals. Vernon Thornton had returned from Vietnam with wounds both visible and hidden. Trucking had saved him, giving purpose to his days and structure to his nights. When Sarah's husband Tom had abandoned them, it was her father who taught her to drive commercially, who watched Ellie while Sarah completed her training, who stood as a bulwark against poverty and despair. "Dad," she whispered to the horizon, "did you know what Max could do? Is that why you left him with me?" At their scheduled stop in Amarillo, Sarah faced another PR event, this one with local female high school students interested in transportation careers. Alexander had sent explicit instructions: stick to the approved talking points, emphasize the company's commitment to diversity, avoid personal stories. But looking at these young women's eager faces, Sarah found herself sharing the unvarnished truth instead: the long nights away from home, the prejudice she'd faced, but also the profound freedom of the open road and the community that existed among drivers. "Don't let anyone tell you what you're capable of," she told them, Maximus sitting attentively beside her. "Find mentors who believe in you, like my father believed in me." One quiet girl raised her hand. "Is it lonely?" Sarah nodded slowly. "Sometimes. But then there are moments of connection that matter more, because they're rare. And sometimes," she added, placing her hand on Maximus's head, "you find companions who understand you without words." As if on cue, Maximus rose and approached the girl, gently resting his head against her knee. Tears welled in the teenager's eyes as she stroked his fur. Later, a teacher explained the girl had recently lost her mother and barely spoken since. It was the first emotional response she'd shown in weeks. That night, Sarah received another call, this time from Claire Bennett, the journalist from the truck stop. "Sarah, that interview we did is getting significant attention," Claire explained. "I'm working on a larger piece about women reshaping traditionally male industries. Would you consider being a central figure?" "I'm just doing my job, Claire. I'm not an activist." "That's exactly why it matters," Claire pressed. "You're authentic in an age of carefully crafted images. And that dog of yours, he's becoming quite the celebrity himself." As Sarah considered her response, a notification appeared, an email from Dr. Chun with an attachment: Canine Emotional Support Certification Program. The message read simply: "Your father began this training with Maximus. Would you consider completing it?" Sarah sat in her cab, America's heartland stretching around her, multiple paths suddenly appearing where once there had been only a single road. Maximus watched her with those knowing eyes, as if understanding perfectly the weight of the decisions before her. "What am I doing, Max?" she whispered. This was supposed to be just another driving job. But deep down, Sarah knew that from the moment that first video had gone viral, nothing would be just anything again. The road ahead, both literal and figurative, was changing with every mile. 3 days into the journey, as Sarah crossed the New Mexico state line, weather alerts began flashing across her dashboard display. A massive storm system was developing in the southwest, unusual for the season and potentially catastrophic. Flash flood warnings covered northern Arizona and parts of New Mexico, with several counties declaring states of emergency. "Thornton, this is dispatch," came the voice of the Golden Road operations manager. "We're rerouting all vehicles away from the affected areas. Your new course will take you south through El Paso, then west. It adds 7 hours, but safety protocols are clear." Sarah studied the weather radar on her tablet, noticing a small community directly in the storm's path, Cimarron Creek, population 1,200. "Copy that," she responded, but something about the situation troubled her. At her next fuel stop, Sarah called Ellie, who was studying environmental science at UCLA. "Hey, can you look something up for me? Cimarron Creek, New Mexico. They're in the path of this storm system, and I want to know if they've evacuated." A few minutes later, Ellie called back, concern evident in her voice. "Mom, it's bad. The main road washed out 2 hours ago. FEMA is mobilized but struggling to reach them. The community is mostly elderly residents and a medical outreach center. They're cut off from supplies." Sarah glanced at her cargo manifest. Medical supplies bound for Phoenix, including emergency kits, basic medications, and portable medical equipment. Exactly what Cimarron Creek needed. She radioed dispatch again. "Request permission to divert to Cimarron Creek with emergency supplies. They're isolated by the storm." "Negative, Thornton," came Alexander's immediate response. "Those supplies are contractually obligated to Phoenix Memorial by tomorrow evening. Corporate legal says diversion constitutes breach of contract." Sarah's jaw tightened. "There are people stranded without medical access." "Not our problem," Alexander replied coldly. "Emergency services will handle it. Stick to your amended route." Sarah sat silent for a long moment after the transmission ended. Maximus watched her intently, his ears forward as if sensing her internal struggle. "What would Dad do, Max?" she murmured. The answer came instantly. Vernon Thornton had never bypassed someone in need, regardless of schedules or corporate policies. With sudden clarity, Sarah made her decision. She entered new coordinates into the navigation system and pulled back onto the highway, turning north instead of south. Using back roads and service paths she remembered from her independent driving days, Sarah maneuvered the massive Peterbilt towards Cimarron Creek. The rain intensified as they approached, transforming dirt roads into treacherous mudslides. Twice she nearly lost control on hairpin turned slick with running water. "Easy, girl," she whispered to the truck, her hands steady on the wheel despite the dangerous conditions. When they reached the town's makeshift emergency center, the local high school gymnasium, Sarah was met with disbelief and then overwhelming gratitude. The elderly mayor, a woman in her 70s with steel-gray hair and a determined gaze, approached as Sarah began unloading supplies. "You're not from FEMA," she stated, helping to carry a box of antibiotics. "No, ma'am. Golden Road Logistics. I was passing nearby." "Passing nearby?" The mayor raised an eyebrow. "Honey, nobody passes nearby Cimarron Creek, even in good weather." Sarah smiled slightly. "Let's just say I made a detour." For the next 4 hours, Sarah worked alongside local volunteers, distributing supplies and setting up emergency medical stations. Maximus proved unexpectedly valuable, his calming presence helping soothe distressed residents, particularly those with dementia who had been agitated by the evacuation. A local nurse watched in amazement as the shepherd gently approached a nonverbal child who had been screaming for hours, settling beside him until the boy quieted and eventually fell asleep against the dog's warm side. "That's remarkable," she told Sarah. "Is he a certified therapy dog?" "No," Sarah replied, remembering Dr. Chen's message. "But I'm starting to think he should be." As the immediate crisis stabilized, Sarah's phone erupted with messages and missed calls from Golden Road, each increasingly urgent. Finally, she answered one from Robert Harrington himself. "Thornton, what the hell are you doing? Alexander tells me you've gone rogue with company property and diverted designated medical supplies." "Sir, I'm in Cimarron Creek. They were cut off by the storm with multiple medical emergencies. The supplies were needed here. That's not your call to make." Harrington exploded. "We have protocols, contracts, legal obligations." "With respect, sir," Sarah interrupted, surprising herself with her boldness. "I made the call any decent human would make. These people needed help more urgently than Phoenix. which has dozens of other supply sources. There was a long silence before Harrington spoke again, his tone different. Are you getting this on camera? Excuse me. The rescue effort. Tell me someone is documenting this. Sarah blinked in confusion. A local journalist is here, but perfect, Harrington said, his business instincts apparently overriding his anger. Make sure Golden Road's involvement is prominently featured. This could actually work in our favor. The compassionate corporation responding to community needs. PR will contact the journalist directly. The call ended, leaving Sarah standing in the rain, torn between disgust at Harrington's opportunism and relief that she wasn't being fired on the spot. By nightfall, as Sarah prepared to continue her journey, word of her diversion had spread through social media. Claire Bennett called, excited. Sarah, the Cimarron Creek story is exploding online. People are calling you the highway guardian. This is perfect timing for our feature on women changing the industry culture. Sarah sighed, watching Maximus comfort an elderly man who had lost his home in the flooding. I'm not trying to change anything, Claire. I just couldn't drive past people who needed help. That's exactly why this matters, Claire insisted. You brought humanity back to corporate logistics. And everyone wants to know more about you and that remarkable dog. As Sarah finally pulled away from Cimarron Creek late that night, lights from emergency vehicles illuminating her rearview mirror, she realized she stood at a crossroads that had nothing to do with her GPS coordinates. The corporate world she'd entered was revealing itself to be more complex than she'd imagined, full of opportunities and compromises alike. And Maximus, sleeping now after his unexpected role as a therapy dog, had revealed capabilities that her father had somehow foreseen, gifts that might lead them both down yet another unexpected path. The Phoenix heat hit Sarah like a wall as she finally completed her delivery, 2 days behind schedule. Golden Road's southwestern facility buzzed with activity, but she noticed the sidelong glances and whispers as she walked through with Maximus. The highway guardian story had spread through the company ranks, polarizing opinion. Some viewed her as a hero, others as a liability who had jeopardized contracts. Alexander Harrington was waiting in the facility manager's office, his expression stormy. You directly violated company protocol, endangered our equipment, and nearly cost us our largest medical supply contract. Sarah stood her ground. Those people needed help. I made a judgment call. That's not your job, Alexander snapped. Your job is to drive the truck where we tell you to drive it. Maybe it should be part of the job, she countered. Humanity before corporate directives. Alexander's laugh was cold, spoken like someone who's never had to balance quarterly projections. While you were playing hero, did you bother to check the truck's fuel efficiency stats? Sarah frowned. What does that have to do with anything? The new ultra-low emission system is showing anomalies. Engineering can't figure it out. He tossed a folder onto the desk. Your Little Mountain adventure may have damaged experimental equipment worth millions in development. Sarah flipped through the reports, her mechanics' instincts sharpening. These readings are strange, but they started before Cimarron Creek. Look at the timestamps. The irregularities began in Des Moines. Alexander dismissed her observation with a wave. The point is, you're on thin ice. My father may be enamored with your social media popularity, but I'm watching the bottom line. After he left, Sarah stayed behind to study the fuel system reports more carefully. Something didn't add up. She remembered her father's warnings about newer, computerized engines. They can lie to you, Sarah Bear, if someone programs them to. That evening, Sarah met Dr. Chun at a local veterinary clinic where Maximus underwent a series of specialized tests. The veterinarian's expertise was immediately apparent as she worked with the shepherd, observing his responses to various emotional stimuli. Your father began specialized training with him, Dr. Chun confirmed, showing Sarah a registration form in Vernon Thornton's handwriting. He was working with a veterans program that trains dogs for emotional support. Maximus shows extraordinary aptitude. His ability to sense emotional changes exceeds most therapy dogs I've worked with. Dad never mentioned any of this, Sarah said, watching Maximus calmly identify which hidden container held an item worn by someone in distress. The registration indicates he wanted it to be a surprise once the training was complete, Dr. Chun replied gently. Perhaps his illness intervened. Sarah blinked back unexpected tears. He was always thinking ahead for me, even at the end. Would you consider completing his training? Maximus could be certified for therapeutic work, hospitals, veteran centers, disaster response. Dogs with his abilities are incredibly rare. Before Sarah could respond, her phone chimed with a message from Miguel, the Chicago mechanic. "Call me ASAP. Found something in the maintenance logs you should know." Minutes later, in the clinic parking lot, Sarah listened in growing anger as Miguel explained his discovery. "Look, I shouldn't be telling you this, but the fuel system modification isn't standard. Alexander Harrington authorized an experimental additive, supposed to boost efficiency, but it's not approved by the EPA. The irregularities aren't from your driving. They're from cutting corners." "Are you saying it's illegal?" Sarah asked, her heart pounding. "Not officially tested is the term they're using. But yeah, if it leaked or caused engine failure, we're talking serious environmental and safety violations." Sarah thought of the hundreds of drivers operating Golden Road trucks with potentially dangerous modifications. "Why tell me?" "Because you're the only one who might actually do something about it," Miguel replied. "Drivers talk. We know you can't be bought or intimidated." That night in her hotel room, Sarah paced as Maximus watched from his bed. If she reported the illegal fuel modifications, she risked her position and Alexander's retribution. If she stayed silent, she became complicit in endangering other drivers and the environment. Her phone rang again, Claire Bennett calling for an update on their feature story. "Claire," Sarah said after a moment's deliberation, "what would you say about expanding the scope of your article? I have information about safety violations that affect more than just women in the industry." "I'd say that sounds like the difference between a feature and a front-page exposé," Claire replied, her journalist's instinct clearly sparked. "But Sarah, be careful. Companies like Golden Road have powerful legal teams." "I have documentation," Sarah said, thinking of Miguel's evidence. "And more importantly, I have the truth." As she ended the call, she noticed Maximus had moved to sit beside her, pressing his warm weight against her leg as if offering support. The gesture reminded her so powerfully of her father that she had to take a deep breath. "What do you think, Max?" she whispered. "Dad always said the right path is usually the hardest one." The shepherd's intelligent eyes seemed to hold an answer, one that Vernon Thornton, with his unfailing moral compass, would have approved. Sarah made her decision, knowing it could cost her everything she'd gained in recent weeks, but unable to betray the principles her father had instilled in her. Tomorrow would bring a confrontation that would determine not just her future at Golden Road, but potentially the safety of countless drivers across the country's highways. The morning dawned clear and bright over Phoenix, belying the storm about to break in Sarah's professional life. She'd spent half the night reviewing the fuel system documentation Miguel had sent, confirming her suspicions. The experimental additive Alexander had authorized could boost efficiency numbers on paper, making the fleet look greener to investors and regulators, while actually increasing the risk of catastrophic engine failure. With Maximus at her side, Sarah entered Golden Road's regional headquarters, the documentation secured on a flash drive in her pocket. Robert Harrington had flown in overnight, apparently to deal with both the PR opportunity from Cimarron Creek and the disciplinary issue of her diversion. The conference room fell silent as she entered. Robert sat at the head of the table, Alexander at his right, along with the company's legal counsel and several board members who had joined virtually. "Ms. Thornton," Robert began formally, "before we address your unauthorized actions, I want to acknowledge that your humanitarian effort has generated significant positive coverage for Golden Road. Our social media engagement is up 340% since the story broke." "Glad to hear my insubordination is good for business," Sarah replied evenly, refusing the offered seat. Maximus positioned himself beside her, perfectly composed yet somehow radiating protective energy. Alexander's smile was tight. "Let's not forget the contractual violations and potential damage to company equipment." "Funny you should mention equipment damage," Sarah said, placing her tablet on the table and pulling up the fuel system data. "I'd like to discuss the experimental fuel additive you've been testing on the fleet without EPA approval." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Robert's expression shifted from confusion to concern as he looked at his son. "What is she talking about, Alexander?" "A misunderstanding," Alexander dismissed quickly. "We're running standard efficiency trials, all within regulatory guidelines." Sarah pulled up Miguel's documentation. "These chemical analyses show otherwise. The additive contains compounds known to degrade engine seals over time. In pursuit of better efficiency numbers for investors, you've created a ticking time bomb in every truck. Robert's face hardened as he examined the evidence. Is this accurate, Alexander? The formulation is proprietary, Alexander countered, but his confidence wavered. We're ahead of the curve on fuel technology. Sometimes innovation requires calculated risks. Calculated risks? Sarah's voice rose. With drivers' lives? With environmental safety? The legal counsel leaned forward. Ms. Thornton, how did you obtain this proprietary information? I have sources concerned about driver safety, she replied, refusing to implicate Miguel. And as lead driver for your road equality initiative, I believe I have a responsibility to ensure the program isn't endangering the very people it claims to support. Robert Harrington stood abruptly. Alexander, my office. Now. He glanced at Sarah. You too, Miss Thornton. Behind closed doors, the confrontation escalated. Alexander abandoned his corporate polish, revealing the entitlement beneath. She's sabotaging everything I've built, he shouted. We needed those efficiency numbers for the EPA presentation next month. The competition is years ahead of us. By cutting corners and risking lives. Sarah countered. This isn't innovation, it's criminal negligence. Robert's expression was thunderous. Is she right, Alexander? Have you compromised our entire fleet to improve quarterly numbers? Alexander's silence was damning. I hired Miss Thornton because we needed to change our company culture, Robert continued. I just didn't realize how desperately. She's nobody. Alexander exploded. A viral video sensation with a trained dog. I've been preparing my whole life to lead this company. And yet she recognized in days what you've been hiding for months, Robert replied coldly. That says something about who's truly qualified to lead. Sarah shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Harrington, I didn't come here to create a family drama. I came because drivers' lives are at risk. And I appreciate that integrity, Robert said. What do you suggest we do now? The question caught her off guard. Full disclosure to regulatory authorities. Immediate recall of all affected vehicles. Investment in legitimate green technology, not shortcuts. That will cost millions, Alexander protested. Less than wrongful death lawsuits and environmental fines, Sarah replied. Robert studied her for a long moment. Do you have any idea what you're asking? The stock price will take a devastating hit. I'm asking you to do the right thing, Sarah said simply. Even when it's hard. Maximus, who had been watching the exchange intently, moved closer to Sarah as if sensing her need for support. Robert noticed the dog's movement, and something in his expression softened. Your father trained him, didn't he? Vernon Thornton. I remember seeing his name in your file. Sarah nodded, surprised. You knew my father? Not personally, but his reputation in the industry was legendary, the most honest driver on the road. Now I see where you get it from. He sighed heavily. Alexander, you're suspended pending an internal investigation. Miss Thornton, I want you to oversee the fleet recall. Dad, you can't be serious. Alexander protested. Dead serious, Robert replied. Ms. Thornton has demonstrated exactly the leadership we need right now. After Alexander stormed out, Robert turned to Sarah. This won't be easy. He has allies in the company. And this recall will be the biggest crisis Golden Road has faced in decades. I didn't ask for this responsibility, Sarah said quietly. No, Robert agreed. But you're exactly the person who should have it. Vernon would be proud. Later that evening, as Sarah sat in her hotel room processing the day's events, her phone rang. It was Claire Bennett. Sarah, I've been digging into Golden Road's fuel practices based on your tip. This is bigger than we thought. 3 other major carriers are using similar unregulated additives. We're talking industry-wide safety implications. Sarah closed her eyes, the magnitude of what she'd uncovered finally hitting her. What happens now? Now, we go to print, Claire said. Your name can stay anonymous if you prefer. No, Sarah decided, watching Maximus sleeping peacefully. My father taught me to stand by my convictions. Use my name. After ending the call, Sarah reached out to Ellie, needing to hear her daughter's voice. Mom, are you okay? You sound stressed. Sarah paused, searching for the right word. I'm evolving, I guess. Taking on challenges I never expected. That's who you've always been, Ellie said softly. You think you're just driving trucks, but you're really changing lives. As Sarah prepared for sleep, knowing tomorrow would bring new storms to weather, she felt an unexpected sense of purpose. The road ahead would be difficult, corporate politics, industry resistance, Alexander's inevitable retribution. But for the first time since her father's death, she felt she was exactly where she needed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. And Maximus, now resting his head on her feet, seemed to understand this new direction before she did herself, just as Vernon Thornton had somehow seen it all along. The days following Sarah's confrontation with the Harringtons transformed her role at Golden Road entirely. Instead of the carefully choreographed ambassador she was hired to be, she became the unexpected face of corporate accountability. Robert Harrington, recognizing both the ethical and public relations value of her stance, appointed her to head a newly created driver safety and compliance division. Her first morning in this position, Sarah found herself in a makeshift office at Phoenix headquarters, poring over fleet records. A knock at the door revealed Dr. Chun, carrying a folder stamped with official certification seals. Maximus's test results, the veterinarian announced, smiling as the shepherd recognized her and approached for a greeting. He's formally qualified for therapeutic service work. The evaluators were astonished by his natural abilities. Sarah accepted the folder, emotions swirling. My father saw something in him that the rest of us missed. Some handlers have an instinct for matching the right dog with the right purpose, Dr. Chin replied. I've prepared a proposal for a pilot program, incorporating certified therapy dogs into long-haul trucking for driver wellness and community outreach. The concept immediately resonated with Sarah. The isolation of trucking contributes to mental health challenges across the industry, and we've seen how Maximus connects with people in crisis situations. Exactly. Golden Road could pioneer a new approach to driver support and community engagement simultaneously. The PR benefits would be substantial. Sarah chuckled. You're speaking Robert Harrington's language now. As word of the fuel system recall spread throughout the industry, Sarah's phone rang constantly. Drivers from other companies reporting similar issues, safety advocates seeking information, and most frequently, Claire Bennett with updates on her expanding investigation. Sarah, this has become a national story, Claire reported that afternoon. 3 major carriers have announced voluntary safety reviews of their fuel systems ahead of my article publishing. They're scrambling to get ahead of the scandal. Good, Sarah replied firmly. That was the point, industry-wide accountability. My editor wants to feature you more prominently in the piece. From viral video to industry whistleblower, the truck driver changing American logistics. Sarah grimaced. That sounds dramatic. It is dramatic, Claire insisted. And important. Would you consider a formal sit-down interview? Your journey from that highway checkpoint to corporate watchdog is compelling. After ending the call, Sarah stared out at the sprawling truck yard visible from her window. The Golden Road fleet stood in neat rows, some already marked with recall notices. Her thoughts were interrupted by another visitor, Robert Harrington himself. The board has concerns, he began without preamble. The recall will cost upwards of $30 million. Shareholders are panicking. And if a single truck had experienced catastrophic failure due to those additives? Sarah countered. The human cost? The lawsuits? The criminal negligence charges? Robert nodded reluctantly. I know. It's just, the transition won't be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is. He studied her thoughtfully. Alexander had allies. People who approved his methods, who valued efficiency over safety. They won't welcome your presence. I'm not here to win popularity contests, Mr. Harrington. I'm here to protect drivers and rebuild trust. Robert, please, he corrected. And speaking of trust, I need someone I can trust in Chicago overseeing the recall logistics. Someone immune to internal pressures or bribery attempts. The implication was clear. He wanted her back at headquarters, directly challenging Alexander's remaining influence. Sarah hesitated, thinking of the therapeutic dog program Dr. Chun had proposed. I'll go on one condition, she said finally. We implement the Canine Companion Pilot Program alongside the recall. Maximus has proven his value beyond just being my traveling partner. Robert glanced at the shepherd, who maintained his characteristic calm vigilance. Truckers and therapy dogs. Not a combination I would have imagined, but then again, nothing about your impact on this company has been predictable. That evening, Sarah called Ellie with the news of their impending return to Chicago. Her daughter's response was unexpected. Actually, Mom, I was hoping to talk to you about something. Ellie's voice carried a mixture of nervousness and excitement. I'm pregnant. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. You're what? 12 weeks along. Luis and I were planning to tell everyone after the first trimester. Luis was Ellie's boyfriend of 2 years, a fellow environmental science student whom Sarah had met only twice. But you're only 23, Sarah protested weakly, knowing immediately how inadequate the response was. And you were 24 when you had me. Ellie pointed out gently. Mom, this is wonderful news, not a crisis. Luis and I are committed to each other. We've been talking about coming back to the Midwest after graduation anyway. Sarah sat heavily on her hotel bed, Maximus immediately sensing her emotional turmoil and pressing close. I'm sorry, sweetheart. You just caught me off guard. Of course, this is wonderful. The conversation continued, Sarah asking all the questions expected of a soon-to-be grandmother while her mind raced with implications. Ellie returning home. A grandchild. Family responsibilities that extended beyond her long-distance phone calls and brief visits. After hanging up, Sarah buried her face in Maximus's fur, whispering, Everything's changing, Max. Everything. For so long. The road had been her escape, from financial pressure, from the painful memories of Tom's abandonment, from the stifling confines of small-town expectations. Now, ironically, as she accepted a permanent position at Golden Road's headquarters, her family was calling her back to a more rooted existence. As Sarah packed for the flight to Chicago the next morning, she received a text from an unknown number. You've made powerful enemies. Watch your back. Not everyone at GR appreciates whistleblowers. She stared at the message, unsurprised yet unsettled. Alexander's allies making themselves known. The road ahead would be challenging in ways entirely different from the physical hardships of long-haul driving. Yet as Maximus settled beside her, his steady presence a constant in her rapidly evolving life, Sarah found herself strangely unafraid. The path was uncertain, but her father's words echoed in her memory. The highway always leads somewhere, Sarah Bear. Trust your instincts, keep your eyes open, and you'll find your way home eventually. Home, she was beginning to realize, might not be a place at all, but a purpose. One that now extended beyond herself to the safety of countless drivers, to the future of her expanding family, and to the remarkable partnership with the dog her father had entrusted to her care. The Chicago winter had settled in with a vengeance by the time Sarah fully established herself at Golden Road's headquarters. Snow blanketed the parking lot outside her office window as she reviewed the latest recall statistics. Nearly 70% of the fleet successfully retrofitted with properly certified fuel systems. The scandal had cost the company millions, but Robert Harrington had maintained his commitment to the systematic overhaul she championed. Maximus lay on his custom bed in the corner of her office, the therapy dog certification proudly displayed on the wall above him. In the 3 months since their return to Chicago, the Canine Companion Pilot Program had expanded beyond Sarah's initial vision. 20 drivers now traveled with specially trained support dogs, and the preliminary mental health impact data was promising: reduced stress levels, improved sleep patterns, and stronger community connections at delivery points. Sarah's desk phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. Miss Thornton, there's an Officer Daniels here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment. She froze, immediately recalling the Wyoming checkpoint where this entire journey had begun. Send him in. Officer Daniels entered hesitantly, his uniform pressed and his demeanor entirely different from their first encounter. His eyes immediately went to Maximus, who had risen to a sitting position, watching the visitor with his characteristic calm alertness. Ms. Thornton, Daniels began, removing his hat. I'm not sure if you remember me. I remember, Sarah replied neutrally, gesturing to a chair. What brings you to Chicago? I've been promoted to Senior Highway Safety Inspector for the Midwest region, he explained, sitting stiffly. Part of my new responsibilities includes improving relationships between enforcement officers and commercial drivers. Sarah waited, sensing there was more. I owe you an apology, Daniels continued, his voice rougher now. My behavior that day was unprofessional and prejudiced. I've spent the past 8 months in diversity training and working with female commercial drivers to better understand the challenges they face. The admission seemed to cost him significant pride. Sarah studied him, noting the genuine discomfort in his posture. What changed? She asked simply. That video changed everything, he admitted. My daughters saw it. My wife saw it. My superiors saw it. But more than the public embarrassment, It forced me to confront beliefs I didn't even realize I held. He glanced at Maximus. And somehow, your dog knew before I did that I needed to be checked. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. He has good instincts about people. The reason I'm here officially is to invite you to speak at our officer training program about driver perspectives. But personally, Daniels hesitated. I wanted you to know that people can change. Even stubborn old highway patrolmen set in their ways. As he left, Sarah felt an unexpected sense of closure. The circle that had begun on that frozen Wyoming morning was completing itself in ways she could never have predicted. Her cell phone buzzed with a text from Ellie. Ultrasound today. It's a girl. Doctor says everything looks perfect. When are you coming to visit? Sarah smiled, touching the grainy ultrasound photo Ellie had sent previously, now framed on her desk. Her daughter and Luis had moved back to Minnesota 2 months ago, settling in a small apartment near Sarah's rarely used house. The pregnancy was progressing well, with the baby due in early spring. A knock at her door revealed Claire Bennett, now a familiar face since her expose on the fuel system scandal had earned her a Pulitzer nomination. The final installment runs tomorrow, Claire announced, placing a preview copy of her article on Sarah's desk. The headline read, Road Revolution: How One Woman and Her Dog Transformed America's Trucking Industry. Sarah winced at the dramatic phrasing. Still feels overwrought. It's accurate, Claire insisted. The certified dog program alone has gained national attention. 3 other major carriers have adopted similar initiatives. The safety protocols you implemented are becoming industry standard, and applications from female drivers to Golden Road have increased 340% since you took over compliance. Before Sarah could respond, her computer chimed with an incoming video call. Dr. Chun from the veterinary program. Sarah, we've selected the next group of therapy dogs for training, the veterinarian reported excitedly. And the Children's Hospital program has expanded to 3 new locations. They're specifically requesting Maximus for their quarterly visits. As Dr. Chin outlined the growth of the program they'd built together, Sarah noticed something in the veterinarian's expression, a warmth that extended beyond professional collaboration. Their work together had gradually evolved into dinners discussing program strategies, which had somehow shifted to conversations about books, childhoods, and eventually, personal hopes. The slow, careful building of something Sarah had never expected to find again after Tom's betrayal. The day concluded with one final visitor, Robert Harrington, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. Alexander has resigned from the company, he announced without preamble. As part of our settlement, he's agreed not to contest any of the safety initiatives we've implemented. That's good news, Sarah replied, though she sensed there was more. I've been thinking about succession planning, Robert continued. Not immediately, but looking ahead. The board is impressed with how you've handled the crisis and rebuilt our reputation. Sarah's eyes widened as she understood his implication. Mr. Harrington, Robert, I'm a truck driver, not a corporate executive. You're a natural leader who understands this industry from the ground up, he countered. Something this company desperately needed. Just think about it. After he left, Sarah stood at her window, watching the snow fall over the truck yard. 8 months ago, she had been a solitary figure on America's highways, her world confined to delivery schedules and the companionship of her father's dog. Now she stood at the center of industry-wide transformation, with family roots re-establishing themselves and unexpected personal connections forming. Maximus pressed against her leg, his solid presence a reminder of the journey's beginning. Sarah knelt to embrace him, burying her face in his fur. Dad knew, didn't he? She whispered. He knew you would lead me somewhere important. As if in answer, Maximus rested his chin on her shoulder in a gesture almost like a human hug. Outside, the lights of trucks preparing for overnight routes illuminated the snowy yard. Each vehicle carrying drivers whose working conditions and safety were now directly impacted by the changes Sarah had set in motion. Soon, she would fly to Minnesota to help Ellie prepare for the baby's arrival. Dr. Chun had already offered to look after Maximus during her absence, though Sarah suspected both would accompany her, the foundations of a found family taking shape around her. The confrontation at that Wyoming checkpoint had indeed triggered a chain of events that reshaped her life. Not just the past 8 months, but the years to come. The road hadn't ended. It had simply changed course, bringing her to a destination her father might have foreseen, but she had never imagined for herself. Sarah Thornton, truck driver, compliance director, future grandmother, industry changemaker, stood at the intersection of all these identities, no longer running from connection, but moving purposefully toward it, with Maximus still faithfully by her side. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and if you watched until here, comment, "I watched until here," and leave your opinion about this story. Oh, and don't forget to watch the next video that appears on the end screen. It's very exciting.